Let's start the Chapter 3 now. In Chapter 3, we will cover the history of Japanese animation. It provides an overview of commercial animation. Please follow along carefully. First, let's look at the history of Japanese animation and how it has developed. Let me briefly explain how it differs from famous non-Japanese animations such as Disney. I don't know all of the history either. But let me tell you about the major difference that continues to today. Japanese animation is fundamentally based on limited animation. This method doesn't rely on excessive movement of drawings. Basically, we set up the layout meticulously. We plan even the smallest details, like beverages. The characters have a conversation. I'm sure you've seen it often. In Japanese animation, characters deliver dialogue with only their mouths moving. This is its fundamental style. Conversely, let's look at animations like Disney or Pixar. I will mainly talk about limited content. France, Korea, and China are also producing diverse animated works, but they are divided into two main styles. I will explain about Disney or Pixar animation. It's very dynamic, and the movement and layout composition are great. It features musical elements and a variety of movements. It has the characteristic of telling a story within it. Basically, it utilizes mouth movements. This is how the story is presented. It's hard to find a moment when the movement stops. Characters are expressed through movement. It's their way of telling the story. I believe these differences stem from the story composition and planning methods. I think they have a big impact. I think they stem from the different national characters. This reflects national characteristics, like those of Japanese and American people. Japanese people are often less expressive when speaking. It seems like this national characteristic is reflected in animation as well. Japan primarily uses limited animation system, with fewer drawings. It wasn't originally like this, but it became the norm for weekly TV animation. Perhaps works like Astro Boy or Tetsujin 28 are examples of this. When they appeared, there were limitations to using as many drawings as in a movie. Back in the day, creating animation was arduous. Each frame had to be drawn and colored on cells. Because of that, it was impossible to air it on TV every week using so many cuts. This style emerged from the characteristic of limited animation. Especially in the 80s and 90s, it started to express stillness and motion. By adjusting stillness and motion, they enhanced dramatic effects. There was a growing understanding that using many frames didn't always add realism. You could say it gradually evolved this way. In Japan, there's a tendency to obsess over layout composition. There's a method of composing with only key animations and no in-betweens. This involves drawing key animation every 3 frames, 8 per second. Drawing 24 frames per second is challenging. Around 8 frames per second is realistically manageable. They express all movement with 8 frames per second for realism. It might feel a bit choppy visually. There was a time when this was considered to be realistic. This is a major characteristic of Japanese animation. It has established itself as a unique style regardless of limitations. This style was formed in the 80s and 90s. It would take some time to explain this part in detail. I can share this content since I researched drawing in animation. Simply put, there's a famous animator in Japan named Kaneda Yoshinori. He had a unique style that's hard to explain. But you'd know it if you saw it. His drawing method for poses and jumps was very unique. I think he was exceptional at depicting human movement as effects. He was a person who has created truly unique animations. He started his career in the 70s. Many people followed him. This is the Kaneda style. Many followed him, but it didn't become a style that designs the entire animation. Also, traditional trends like a productions or world masterpiece theater style continued. Kaneda was likely the catalyst for individual animators gaining attention. After that, Utsunamiya Satoru appeared, changing animation industry. This is from the 80s, and he drew the human body as characters. When expressing movement, he didn't focus on completeness or acceleration. Of course, all of you would consider those points when drawing. In particular, a tendency to focus on those parts gradually appeared. This also gained followers and became known as the Utsunamiya style. It's hard to explain, but it views the human body like a 3D ragdoll. Emphasizing joint movement was originally tried by Nakamura Takashi. Perhaps he worked with a similar approaches. I think the person who developed this further was Utsunamiya. It's like all joints interact like a doll to form the body. It's a style of expressing this with precisely calculated movements on a timeline. This doesn't just apply to the human body. In effects, elements such as smoke and fire were also previously drawn as symbols. It felt similar to the Chinese characters. It was expressed in this form. Drawing it upwards was the common method. I'll briefly demonstrate Utsunamiya style. I'm not sure if I can draw it well, but I'll try. He emphasizes how air currents appear and rise. He doesn't just draw the flame. He focuses on the fire's energy and how wind affects it. There has been a strong movement to express these physical phenomena. This was a time when many animators began to think that way. Even before that, there were people like Nakamura who put effort into it. The overall trend among animators shifted in that direction. Everyone started following that method. This was the beginning of animation realism. This trend continues into the 2000s. In innocence, it reached its limit, making further achievement difficult. I think that was the trend. You could call it a kind of fetishism. Accuracy became a priority. The focus shifted to accurately depicting physical phenomena. There was a time when this trend spread into a major movement in Japan. This trend produced notable works. The examples include Innocence and Mobile Police Patlabor 2. In the theatrical version, the layout was captured very precisely. Elaborate screen direction was a trend for a while. It became almost excessively stylized. Recently, the realism continued from the late 90s to the 2000s. Not many people understood the realism style. Many techniques did exist. Still, the value of outstanding realism didn't spread easily. But the industry would have been amazed. Aspiring animators would have found it extraordinary. But without knowledge, it's difficult to appreciate its greatness. There was a growing tendency to focus more and more on characters. So-called pretty girl works seem to have appeared since the 80s. Early works include Dirty Pair and Urusei Yatsura. Cute female characters were the primary focus, so were stimulating elements like action scene or everyday events. Character charm is essential. This is true for Miyazaki Hayao's animation, as well. The trend of showing and selling with a focus on characters has taken hold, and this is a recent tendency. There's an increasing demand towards pretty girl works. Recently, I think the light novel genre is also included in this trend. Realism or artistic elements have become less popular recently. Basically, if a female character isn't cute, it's hard to get the viewer's attention. Planning methods that consider the tendencies of paying customers are spreading. It's not just female characters. Many works feature cool male characters for female viewers. I agree with character-centered approach. It might be more suitable than realism for the animation. I don't necessarily think the current trend is bad. Of course, it's a shame that the genre is narrowing. But I think creating attractive characters in animation is a very good thing. I've strayed from the topic. The history of Japanese animation started with limited methods and led to realism. Ultimately, fetishistic elements and character-centered animation has developed. There would have been various changes overseas as well. Still, other countries likely didn't go to the same extremes. Fetishism in mainstream animation was less prevalent. I think this shows the uniqueness of the Japanese people. Fetishistic elements in anime appear primarily in Japanese and Asian cultures. I think this probably stems from differences in human brain structure and culture. There's more to Japanese animation than cinematic ones. Many other styles are also mainstream. I also prefer this style. There are also various artistic styles in non-Japanese animation like in France. So far, we've been talking about Japanese animation. But my style, colors, and filming techniques are a bit different. So is my method of finishing visuals. they've been affected by non-Japanese animation. I use a method of weakening outlines and emphasizing color and light. This style is mainly used in non-Japanese ones and is not Japanese. But recently, you can see this style in various works. Let's talk about lighting effects and backlighting, and the various ways of using rim light seem to be influenced by illustration. This also probably originates from Western films' lighting techniques. Various elements are interacting. Aesthetic elements are shared across borders. This exchange of ideas shapes animation's form. I think it's something that continues to evolve without set rules. Currently popular directions will also gradually disappear. I think there's a very high possibility that new trends will appear. Let's end the historical story here. I'm going to wrap it up around here. Before that, I'll discuss the animation used for key animations. This will be focused on the animation. There are several different approaches to how to make a key animation. I'll explain the content comparing Japanese and non-Japanese styles. I am a digital artist. Animation was originally drawn by hand. They draw on A4 paper with holes called punch holes. Japanese animation is drawn with a pencil. This is the traditional drawing style in animation. This will especially resonate with those of you recently taking this class. Nowadays, it's common to create animation or illustrations with computer software. It's already been 18 years since I've entered this industry. Back then, there was no one drawing digitally. But the few animators who led me into the industry are exception. Anyway, no one worked digitally. I think it was difficult in many ways and caused a lot of trouble. I thought about digital work itself. Japan uses limited animation. Non-Japanese animation often uses the in-between method to show all movements. I'll explain in-betweens in detail later. To make all movements smooth, they insert all the drawings themselves. They create the movie with the key animation's movements completed. Cleanup and in-between work are handled differently, too. This difference is evident in the video field. Something came to mind, so I'll explain a bit. Usually, when drawing on paper, the amount of paper is limited. In terms of efficiency, drawing many key animations per cut is too costly. For example, let's say there's an action of turning around and raising a hand. I'll explain it using animation software here. Let me give you an example. There's a character like this. In fact, I need to draw the key animation in more detail. the body is also moving. Let's say it raises its hand. Let's think of the current key animation placement. There are 4 drawings, which is a very Japanese way. Originally, the face turns slightly first. Then, the eyes move first, and as the face and neck turn, the shoulders move. Next, the feet are animated. The feet's position is subtly shifted off-screen, achieving this pose. It's an expression of the action of raising a hand. When raising a hand, the fingertips go first, the joints bend, and it goes up. In old animation, it would have been expressed with about this many drawings. All these intermediate drawings are handled as in-betweens. Simply put, there are people in charge of drawing in-betweens. If you insert 2 drawings, you insert them in between like this. The movement is created by rotating little by little. It's a method of having someone else create the action of turning around. It's a division of labor, not drawing it yourselves. By dividing the in-betweens, the entire movement is completed. This is the American-style production method called pose-to-pose. This method requires skilled techniques. At first, it's hard to estimate how many drawings to insert to complete one action. When I made personal works, I had to draw the in-betweens myself. I've done it all myself. Despite my experience, I faced challenges. Creating key animations for commercial projects was tough. The number of in-betweens needed was always a difficult decision. I still check to make sure that I've set the amount of in-betweens properly. As explained, I often deliberately insert drawings and check them. That's how hard it is to get a sense of how many in-betweens to insert. Of course, a skilled person would be able to tell at a glance, like 5 or 6. It's quite a difficult task. Let's say you draw this on paper. Testing requires inserting another sheet. You flip it by hand to check the movement. So it's very difficult to confirm exactly. Drawing on paper was originally very difficult for me. Then, I received a computer when I was in middle school. This opened up the possibility of digital drawing for me. At that time, there was comic software called EasyToon, and I made animation with it. It was the era of working with a mouse. My method was simple sequential drawing. I drew scenes one after another, with no concept of in-betweens. Let me give you another example. Let me explain with this example. This is a drawing style called straight ahead. It's also called sequential drawing and is often used in action scenes. I'll explain by simply referring to the previous one. It's about drawing matching the number of scenes. This is a method of drawing in order. Draw all the pictures in order. It's a method that doesn't insert in-betweens. It's a way to complete the whole thing without in-betweens. For example, if there are 3 cuts, it becomes a movement like this. The last cut seems to slow down, the frame rate would be about 12. This is the straight ahead approach. In Japan, movements using in-betweens are called sequential animation. That expression is familiar to me, but likely differs from the original meaning. For now, please think that there are these 2 drawing methods. This method is called sequential animation, which I basically used even after entering this industry. I thought it would be good to learn this method. Digital work had advantages, even with my limited experience. Checking movement in real time helped me become quite skilled. But when I actually drew it on paper, it didn't turn out well. The movements are expressed with rough key animations at first. The animation director then steps in. They correct and finalize the animation with second key animations. I created these rough drawings digitally. Then, I made corrections and finalization myself. In the end, when I saw it on screen, it had a completely different impression. The outcome was unexpectedly different. The animation was poor, lacking smoothness. I struggled with that problem for years at the beginning. I hadn't anticipated this challenge. It worked smoothly digitally, so I underestimated the difficulty. After that, I solved the problem by drawing key animations digitally. Even now, there seem to be parts that don't get drawn well on paper. Honestly, I think that considerably influences the final result and movement. And I sometimes notice a difference in quality of the experts' works. Their key animations on paper have a stability that mine often don't. I think this is because I'm exceptionally poor at that. That may be why so many young artists are working digitally these days. Now, the difference between paper and digital might not be that important. You can say that's the case. Still, the accuracy of the animators of the previous generation is truly amazing. I found it difficult to surpass that high standard. The more skilled you are, the harder you will feel. After the 2000s, the number of skilled young animators increased. Regardless that high standard, their directions seem different. Now it feels like they're pursuing different goals. I'm afraid if some techniques have disappeared. Getting back to the main topic, recently it's not limited to Japanese animators. Key animations come from diverse sources. Many are done by animators from various countries outside Japan. Sometimes, I feel that they started from a different background than Japanese one. Most of them often work with digital software instead of paper. Many people in charge of action scenes especially seem to be doing it that way. They often use different techniques. Many use sequential animation or the straight-ahead technique for these. There are many people who create dynamic videos. They're not making it move in a limited way. I get the feeling that it's based on non-Japanese animation. However, there are also many people who admire Japanese animators. It seems like a strange relationship of re-importing and exporting has been set. Overseas animators have a distinctive style. They use drawings boldly and create dynamic scenes with sequential animation. On the other hand, what about young animators in Japan? Some animators are gaining recognition. They excel at depicting realistic movement in typical animation settings. There are many pretty girl works and everyday scenes as projects. This trend likely has a cause. Cinematic persuasiveness and realism are often needed in modern animation. There are movements such as walking, turning around, and running. A certain skill seems to be prevalent. Many animators effectively express characteristics through everyday actions. I'll talk about whether to insert in-betweens or not. And I'll explain about using in-between references. Let me explain with the pose-to-pose method. It means handling this step personally. Rather than relying on the video staff, you draw them yourselves. The drawing is a bit rough. You give the instructions to some extent, asking to do it in a certain way. These days, you have to insert them, otherwise it often doesn't work. For example, the profile is essential for the process. If it's missing, in-betweening is considered to be ineffective. Imagine you check the direction. Let's say there's an key animation of completely turning back. It's better if we don't need in-betweens, but this movement would require them. The method has evolved. It now involves inserting reference drawings or making them up yourselves. It's meaningless to talk based on the old methods now. High-quality animation has a new challenge. It might require drawing every single frame. The animation from about 15 years ago usually didn't have everything drawn. There were also vague movements with in-betweens, and I like that. For various reasons, there's now a trend where such animation isn't allowed. The difference between these two methods seems to be gradually disappearing. Despite this trend, some animations still shine. They effectively use limitations, resulting in excellent in-betweens. When I see that, I feel like I can't keep up at all. Japanese and non-Japanese animations have distinct qualities. They differ in methods, abilities, and artistic preferences. The difference between the old and now is also quite large. I wanted to convey the depth of the topic, the histories, and various styles. In non-Japanese styles, they also draw in-betweens themselves. It's a method that reflects a strong will to create ideal scenes without compromise. This method is especially well suited to digital animation. These people will increasingly utilize digital or 3D in the future. I briefly explained the history of animation. I've conveyed various trends in current situations. This concludes this chapter. I'm looking forward to our next time. Thank you.